Well, hi everybody. Just wait to see if some people come in to the live stream. Excuse me, but welcome to the Inside Outers live stream episode 2. So we had our first episode last year in December, and just changed the name, or updated the name, you could say, or even created the name to the Inside Outers. What that means, where that name comes from, was a group therapy group that I ran for a number of years in Melbourne. I called it the Inside Outers group. And basically the philosophy, if you like, of that group is about living life from the inside out. The idea of working on the issues within to then affect life and life outside of ourselves, and that we can try and develop things from the outside, affecting change on the outside. But if there's something going on the inside that we haven't addressed, then that ultimately will impact our outer world. So a lot of people who are trying to address something for many, many years and it's not working, most likely because there's something going on within that needs to be discovered, uncovered, and worked through. So today, I'm going to introduce the idea of the roots and fruits idea, and I'll go into it in a lot more detail in a moment, but essentially it's about being open to what might be the roots of the issue within, and then obviously addressing those issues, and then what we're often aware of, though, is the fruit. The external things, relationship problems, work problems, health, anxiety, depression, these sort of more, even though depression and anxiety is internal, it's really a surface issue for those deeper issues. So I'll go into a lot more detail, just allow people time to come to the live stream. So the live stream will be happening once a month. Basically, for the US, it'll be the last Thursday of every month. For those in Australia and sort of the Pacific, Asia Pacific region, it'll be Friday during the day. So that's currently 1 p.m. on a Friday for me here. So I've just got some times for people that might view this later. So for those in the Pacific Standard Time area, it'll be 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time 7 p.m. Central Standard Time 8 p.m. and Eastern Standard Time 9 p.m. on a Thursday night. So what I'll do after just a few more things to cover, we'll go into the topic, and then if there's any questions or comments that people want to make, feel free to start making those, and I'll address them after I've, I guess, given the presentation. My lovely wife Kate is moderating for us today, so she'll be helping to sort of collect the questions and comments and sending them through to me, so I don't have to be spending time just feeding through the comments, just allow things to run more smoothly. Okay, so again, just to let people know that I have a Patreon page like many other creators do. It's just an opportunity for people that want to support the work that I'm doing, that find that I'm providing value to their lives, that it's just a way of, I guess, showing some appreciation in a financial sense. No obligation at all to do that, but it's always nice to have people sort of support a small financial contribution once a month. So the Patreon link will be in the description for those watching this after the live stream. And thank you to my current patrons that have been supporting me more recently, or from last year. It's much appreciated. Okay, I want to sort of welcome a lot of the new subscribers. The channel's grown quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 months. Had about 600 new subscribers, I think, since about October. which is quite an increase. So welcome to all the new subscribers, and I hope that the content this year is helpful to you in some way. So I had a number of inquiries late last year for counselling, and it sort of dawned on me that when I was counselling more face-to-face, the reputation was there, the referrals were there. I didn't necessarily sort of have to market myself or explain who I was. But of course, moving towards online, people see my videos and see the content, but in a way, for a lot of people that don't look much further than that, don't realize my counseling history and so on. And so I had a number of inquiries asking for credentials, for information. Are you professionally accredited? All of these sorts of things, which I didn't realize. Yeah, just I guess it just didn't occur to me that I didn't. Sorry, that that information in my head was a given, but of course for people watching, they have no clue. I could just be, like a guy in a room just talking about what he knows, and there's not a professional backing to what I'm doing. So just to let you know that I'm currently in my 10th year of professional counselling. Started in 2008, 2009 after after completing a BA in counselling. So I have 10 years, nearly 10 years experience. I am I'm professionally accredited in the sense that to be, have insurance and to be a professional, you need to be part of a counselling association, and so I'm a member of an association that requires certain levels of professional development and supervision every year, which I complete each year. So there's a little bit of, I guess, the professional credentials that back up what I do. So the information that I provide is, I guess, a combination of my counselling, everything that I've learned through the degree, my personal experience, being a counsellor for 10 years. It sort of all culminates into, you could say, a theory or a way of viewing life and viewing the growth journey, you could say. So of course I have my own ideas on that, and some of the channel is about sort of sharing those ideas. But from a professional counselling perspective, it's really about me creating a space for a client to bring their full self to the picture. So it's not about me imposing my idea or my way of seeing the world. It's about me creating a space so that I can understand how the client sees the world. And once that space is created, then I can help provide a process in order to help the client get from A to B, A to Z, and whatever the client's goal is. So for those that aren't aware, I do provide online counselling, Skype counselling for people basically all over the world. So if that's something that appeals to you, if the work that I do, the way that I approach things resonates with you, feel free to check out my website. It's scottericmorgan.com, and I'll leave a link in the description for that as well. And feel free to send me an email to inquire about the services and the fees and so on. I'll be happy to get back in touch with you. So, and I guess it's just important to mention that the MBTI, which a lot of this channel is really about, is only a small part of what I do as a counsellor. It's very much would consider myself more of a holistic counsellor in the sense of adopting many disciplines into, and sort of bringing it into a whole to be available to a client that may need a specific style from me, so I adapt myself to the client's need. And that could, within that process, there could be a range of counseling modalities: narrative therapy, CBT, internal family systems, really just whatever is required for the client. So yeah, just to put out there that the MBTI is just a fragment of the bigger picture within the counseling context. And this channel, while it's been MBTI focused and a lot of it's been INFJ focused, there will be an expanding of the focus. For those that saw the video, the 10, I'm just trying to remember the name of it, 10 truths every parent of an INFJ needs to know. If you read those 10 points, really a lot of those points apply to any child, not just an INFJ child. If a parent adopted that sort of style to their child, it's probably going to lead to good things. And so a lot of what I want to present in these live streams is really for anybody seeking to understand things in a different way, in a hopefully a deeper way, in order to maybe unlock some things within, so that they can then move forward in whatever aspect they need to in their lives. So for me, I'm sort of like with a website, you know, you can manipulate the content of your website, or like rearrange it from the front end, and then there's those that know code and all of that in the back end, and sort of work through the code, which then presents the content on the surface of the screen. Now, when it comes to website creating, I'm a front end person because I don't know a lot about that sort of stuff. So in that context, I like to be able to rearrange what's going on the surface. But when it comes to counseling, when it comes to life, I'm very much about what's the code behind the scenes, what's making the program tick, i.e. what's making this person tick, what's going on behind the scenes. And so my process really is about helping a client to understand their own coding, their own inner workings and processes, bringing that to the surface for illumination. And a lot of that process leads to a lot of clarity, and normalizing of the challenges, and releasing of the emotional content of it, to releasing a person to be able to live more effectively in their world. So moving on. So the illustration that I'm going to provide today, I'll leave a link to that to my website in the bottom of this video. It's not there now, but it will be shortly after the release of the video, after the live stream. Okay, so I'm not sure if I can share my screen here or not. I can, but I think I won't. I think instead I'll do it. I'll do it on this butcher's paper here. Let me first show you. Sorry, before I do that, let me try and show you the PDF that I'm talking about. Okay. No, I don't want to go there. Cancel that. That's all. Okay. Now I just need to quickly go into the chat just to see, just get confirmation that you guys can see the PDF. Let me mute that. Can someone just tell me if they can see the live chat? Sorry, not the live chat, the Roots and Fruits PDF on the page. I can see. Great. Okay. So let me go into. So hopefully you should be able to see that. So this was put together by a friend and colleague that has since passed away a number of years ago. Jeff Grube, and he put this together, and it really is a good summary of kind of like the person. So I'm going to draw it on the board, but just to show you what it looks like here, underneath the surface, so we've got a tree, and the roots go down first, and then the tree starts to grow. And a tree that is like a newly growing tree is very vulnerable, if you like, to the weather, to the external conditions. And ideally, we want the best conditions possible for that tree to grow up healthy and strong. Often in life, as children, we don't grow up in ideal conditions. Some more than others. Some have great conditions, some have horrific conditions. But for the most part, the average person has, you could say, average conditions, and things happen. It could be very, very obvious, horrific things, very traumatic things that happen, or they could just be seasons in a child's life that things weren't going well in the external world, and it has an impact on them. And that leads to a disturbance, it leads to pain, and eventually, and I'll go through the middle part of this on the board, but eventually that can lead to some poor fruit in life. We can have suffer from depression, have excessive amounts of fear, a lot of stress in our lives, relationship problems, conflict issues with people that don't seem to have a resolution. We could find ourselves being overly controlling. These are the external fruits that are evidence that there's something wrong. And so let me just come out of here, and then I'll draw it on the board. Let me go back. Stop. Okay. All right. So hopefully this will make sense to people. So I'll go a little bit over what I just said, but then expand on it a little further. So where are we? Let me choose a different color. So I've got the roots, the tree. Let's try and keep the colors. Okay, so like I was saying, we can have some poor roots, some unhealthy roots, some damaged roots within us that is developed in childhood. So roughly speaking, and there could be just one area where it didn't go right, and that has caused problems, or it could be a whole range of things. But children are very vulnerable to their external environment. So we could have just general neglect, which sometimes can be more. Neglect can actually be more damaging in some respects than like outright physical abuse. It's certainly different, but in its own way, it can be more destructive, because when there's external physical abuse and things like that, it's very obvious. We can see it, we feel it, and it's harder to deny. Let's put it that way. Whereas neglect is usually, it's something that's not happening, and if we grow up in it, we don't know necessarily, consciously, that neglect is taking place, that we are not having our needs met, whether it's physical affection or affirmation or diet or security. Something is not there. And it can sometimes take a long time for people to recognize this, because it's usually often the absence of something, whereas more like physical, even sexual abuse is obviously very obvious, very external. It's something that is happening. We can have other traumas. We can have life events that happen growing up. Now, we can all experience trauma differently. Something that one child found they found very traumatic. Another child could have not even recognized that it was going on just because of their temperament and the way they're built. They don't recognize it like the other person does. But trauma essentially is defined as a witnessing or experience of near death, either of the actual person or viewing it from somebody else. But in a sense, neglect is a form of trauma, because it's, in a sense, it is an unconscious threat to the self. When we're not getting our legitimate security needs met, we're not in control of them, and someone isn't doing that. I think there's an innate sense of insecurity that's developed. So trauma can be very subtle, and it can be like, you could say, subtle traumas versus very, very horrific traumas: sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal abuse, very unstable childhoods, and so on. Some people can experience a lot of shame growing up, in the sense that they're due to a caregiver's, or even peers, but let's look at caregivers. So yeah, shame. No, aircon. Yeah, maybe the aircon's causing this problem. Let me just put it on quiet. See if that helps. So the difference between shame and neglect is, shame and guilt. Guilt is I've done something wrong, or I've done something bad, and I feel some sort of natural, healthy guilt about that. Whereas shame is I'm bad, I'm defective, my core, my identity is flawed in some way. And depending on a child's health of caregivers, some of that information or some of those issues inside the parent can actually be communicated to the child. The child essentially, I don't think we're born perfect as such, but we're certainly born roughly a blank slate. We do. It's that nature versus nurture debate. We are born with a temperament. We're born with, the equal amount of chromosomes from each parent. We have certain traits. So there's sort of something that gets built upon. We're very much impacted by the environment around us, the nurture side of things. And so we say, for the most part, that the child is, you could say, innocent, like innocent in a sense, even though children can behave poorly and they can act out and they can do silly things and so on. That's part of growing up. But we say essentially that the child is innocent, and but the messaging that can come from a parent can be very shaming. And one of the things to possibly keep in mind with that, if that resonates with you, is it's like, if we're feeling shame, it's often not ours. It's often somebody else's shame. They've shamed us and we've taken it on. Some part of us has believed it. But it's like it's been received. So sometimes that can be a very helpful way to sort of separate from the shame a little bit. But often shame can come out of our childhood. There's something bad about me. There's something wrong about me. And you might have been in the market at some point in your life, and you've seen a parent and a child, and this isn't to shame parents, by the way. They have their own set of issues and so on, but we also want to be honest about some of the things that happen. Is that you often been in a supermarket, and the parent and the child might be acting out in some way, and you hear the parent shame the child, saying very cutting messages, and you're there looking at the cereal, kind of dying on the inside, hearing a parent just transmitting their own brokenness into the child. And, not a lot we can do about that, but that's kind of what I mean by the shame. It's usually something that's put into us at a young age. And all of this, in a sense, can come under another banner, rejection. Often we can have a childhood where we're feeling quite rejected by the environment around us. Even the neglect can lead to a feeling of rejection, or outright physical abuse, and all of that. All of that can kind of come under the sense of rejection. I'm rejectable. There's something wrong with me. Now, this doesn't have to happen. Some people watching it might be, oh no, that's very heavy, very full on. For some people, it is heavy and full on. For some, subtle. It's just a subtle sense, and it could be just the slight absence of a particular, like a father, like the father, just not quite present in a certain area of a person's life that can lead to like a crease, like a hairline fracture within. So it doesn't have to be full-blown chaos of a childhood. It can certainly be a lot more subtle than that. That can lead to some brokenness. Rejection is often a really good way to describe it. We have a belief that we're under a rejection. We're coming from a place of I'm not good enough versus I'm okay, and let's engage with life. Now, of course, abandonment can take on many forms as well. That can be, obviously, both parents disappear, one parent disappears at some point, or it can just be, even while the nuclear family is still together, in some respects, a child can feel abandoned within the family system. They can feel invisible. They can feel like they're not there, or they're not being mirrored back. Their reality, or their actual reality, is not being mirrored back. Like the invisible child and things like this. So I'll just add these other things here just to. So, like I mentioned before, there can be just clear abuse that's taken place that obviously can be very damaging. So all of this basically equals pain. And if you imagine a tree, you know, when you cut a tree, when you cut a tree down, there's all the rings. That, I think it's each year there is a ring or something like that. The old wood. So you can imagine a tiny little young tree. It's those very early rings, if you like, the rings of wood that get impacted, that get hurt, impacted in some way. But then the child keeps growing, and more wood and layers grow out. And then you've got like the bark on the outside. And I guess you could say the bark is like a form of protection from the outside elements. And what a lot of people try to do is they try to perfect the bark. They try to protect their outer reality to deal with the world. And some of that's probably is sort of natural, normal, in a sense that we can't be fully transparent in the world at all times. It's just that isn't healthy as well. So a certain level of bark of protection is required. The way we protect ourselves, the way we present ourselves in the world. But when there's problems, when there's challenges that I was referring to earlier, this fruit, let me just get my thoughts back in order. What a lot of people do is they try to fix the fruit, and they try to find other ways to protect themselves, other ways of addressing things that are like surface level. They're not addressing the actual issue. And it's kind of like there needs to be an opportunity to go down into the center of that tree, the center of the person, to the part that was originally wounded. And until that gets healed, in a sense, the rest of the tree won't be healthy. And it's the addressing of the original wound within that leads to the better fruit of life, i.e., moving from depression to having energy and healthy, from relationship problems to healing relationships and so on. But I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself. So what essentially happens with all of this is this leads to a sense like I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm rejected, there's something wrong with me. These sorts of beliefs, if you like, about the self. And what I'd like to sort of highlight at this point, let's say underneath the seed, let's say this, the seed that originally sort of started everything off. That now this is a way we could find all sorts of ways to describe the self and all of that. But I like to just describe it as it's the person that was conceived, it was the person that was created, the person that was born. There's like a core, there's like a true self, if you like, that sits there. That's essentially untouchable by all of this. And what happens is that seed, that core sense of true self, if you like, gets covered over by all of these other issues. And so often people think this is their identity, because in a sense, because a lot of this happens in early childhood, it's all they know. They don't realize that there's actually something underneath all of that that is really their true core self. So then on top of the true self is all of these issues that leads to the, not enough, not good enough. All sorts of beliefs that back up the trauma, that back up the experience the child has had growing up. And so there's a lot of pain, basically. There's pain, but a child has a hard time expressing that, describing it, talking about it. They'll certainly show signs of pain, but essentially the pain that the child has as a result of the environment they grow up in, that environment can't heal it. So the child may act out in some way or show signs that they're wounded, that they're hurt, but the environment in which it occurred in can't actually heal it unless the caregivers have an awakening themselves. They go, far out, I can see what I'm doing. This is exactly what my parents did to me. I need to do something about this in me so that I don't continue to pass this on to my child. Oftentimes that doesn't happen. And so when the child presents a woundedness that they're carrying due to a caregiver's behavior, it usually it makes the caregiver very uncomfortable, and then they get more neglect, they get shamed in some way for being hurt by what they did. So the pain has to be managed in some way, and essentially every child does it differently, and we can have a whole different sort of setup of pain management. The cliche way of describing it is certain addictions. We can develop addictions to deal with our pain. Now that can be, your classic alcoholism. Someone at the age of 14 has their first drink of alcohol and it just lights them up. Suddenly, all of that disconnection within, it helps them to feel connected, and then they're able to communicate and have a great time and all of that, and then they're hooked and they can't stop drinking. For some people, they had that first drink of alcohol and it just made them sick, and they didn't do it again, or they're not interested. Other people can be other things. Now we can use anything as a dependency: video games, food, clothes, shopping, sexual behaviors, all manner of things that can be used. There's a list here. Negativity could be a dependency, just always negative about everything that's going on. Stamp collecting, just anything that enables a person to get outside of themselves where the pain is sitting. And some are more socially acceptable than others. But it's just a behavior that sort of tries to separate, person trying to separate from themselves, from their pain. The good news is, in a sense, and the sad news is that they're actually separating from what is not them. It's what's been created in them, because underneath all of that is the true self. So those dependencies, to some level or another, because some people some people like a high functioning versus sort of more low functioning. Some people, they have that first drink at 14 and their life is absolutely like chaos and destruction for 20 years. Whereas some people, they go on, they achieve, they do well, but in a sense, performance can also be a dependency. It can be, I'm going to perform for approval, and that's my medication to the sense that I actually don't feel good enough or valuable or things like that. So anything can become a dependency. And essentially, it's like a false self. Just add some to the. So in here, in a sense, like this could be, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, of life where we have some form of dependency, just not living life from the true self, where we're not in our true self, so we're in pain, and so we need something to manage the pain. And that leads ultimately, let's find a new color here. Probably not. Just bear with me. Oh, what's this? Can lead to the fruit. So we've got the roots. The whole idea is of this is the roots and the fruits. So we can have poor roots, pain, and so on, and so we end up with poor fruit, damaged fruit, if you like. So, and there can be a whole range of different things for people. Like the list is really endless, but some key ones are like job problems, relationship problems. You could find overly controlling, all sorts of anxieties, fears. What else have we got here? There could be health problems, just issues with conflict, all manner of things up here. And this is usually what drives people into counseling or seeking something. This is like a feedback loop. The pain associated with all of this leads to dependency, which leads to poor fruit. Poor fruit causes pain, conflict, relationship problems, marriage breakdowns. All of this sort of stuff causes problems, which leads to more of the dependency to cope with it. And around and around and around it goes. So, yes. So this, in extreme cases, it just becomes unmanageable, and it's usually this that leads people to seeking help. Now, two directions essentially could come out of that. One is trying to tinker with this in some way. So a person could go and like find some strategies to deal with their anxiety. Now, I'll say there's nothing wrong with that. That can be very beneficial, and it could actually lead to a resolution of the anxiety. For a lot of people, though, it's often a band-aid approach. So let's say there's health problems. In one sense, it could be like a lack of exercise and things like this. So a person goes and starts getting healthy. They start running and doing exercise, loses weight, starts eating better. All good things. But in a sense, it could be, they could go from being unhealthy due to these issues to healthy, which is better than unhealthy. Lost the weight, fitter, eating better, and all of those are good things. But it can also turn into a dependency, if you like, and the root issues aren't resolved, and so there's just a lot of work. A person can be working really hard up here. They could lose all the weight and get the compliments, and everything looks great on the outside, but this isn't resolved. Another common one up here is anger. Someone could find themselves quite angry, and something could happen at like a workplace, and they get angry and upset. They have to go to anger management. So they go to anger management and learn some tools and strategies to cope better with their anger. And that might work for a season, or it could lead to a resolution, but often it's just trying to manipulate, if you like, and control these up here so that there's better outcomes in life. But it often doesn't lead to holistic healing, if you like, or doesn't lead to real change, because none of this is being addressed. And unfortunately, a lot of people that go to see a counselor, you want to find a counselor that can take you here, not up here. Like, this is just signs and evidence, it's the fruit that something else is wrong. Now, in the short term, those interventions, those band-aids, those techniques, if you like, to deal with anxiety and anger can be helpful short-term solutions, helpful short-term um, interventions whilst going down here. However, it's again, a holistic approach is addressing this, the dependencies, and addressing, like, sometimes it's all, each person is different, but essentially working on this can help reduce the dependencies. Reducing the dependencies can help get in touch with this. Foods is actually a good one to describe this, because some people, life is going fine, everything's all right, but they've got this thing with food, or this thing with sugar, or whatever. And when they stop eating the sugar and they stop eating those sort of more unhealthy foods, it takes them down here. Feel, in a sense, on the surface of cooking, they just feel depressed or irritable or anxious, or they just start finding themselves worrying about things, because the sugar was actually kind of medicating, in the sense that there are emotions under the surface. And so reducing this can actually lead to a discovery of these things. Where else to take this? I'm sure there'll be other things that I wished I said afterwards, but essentially that is just one way of describing the life process and the problems that can occur, and the way in which to address or start to look at the self in order to come to a place of healing. And I would say it's essentially like a lifelong journey. It's a slow progression of growth and change. We don't deal with this all overnight. We could deal with some things quite quickly. Some things just take time. Sometimes we're just not ready to deal with some of these things, and then, at some point, some aspect of this comes to the surface because we're essentially ready to. So it's all about being ready to work through this sort of thing. I think that about covers it. I can't think of anything else to describe at this point. I'm sure maybe there'll be some questions and comments that might help us to engage with this, or there might be questions, or maybe I'll leave that there like that. So let me just go into the chat, unless I have. Where would I find the comments and questions, if there are any? Okay. Okay. Is the core of the self described by MBTI, or does it describe the outer self? Okay. So I've had Kate's just been collecting any comments and questions just to help me, instead of reading through. If there's, it doesn't look like there's a lot there, but Kate, can you tell me where you've emailed it, perhaps? There it is. Great. How do you distinguish INFJ's positive use of I versus potential negative use? That is a good question. I will answer. Karen, I think it is. Co-S asks, is the core of the self described by MBTI, or does it describe the outer self? I'm just not quite sure how to read the question. Essentially, I think you're saying that you've read some description of the core of self that the MBTI describes, and is it really them describing the outer self? Co-S, maybe just if you could just give me a bit more of a clarification of that. Is there a cross below the roots? I've drawn something similar, a tree with its root connecting to the cross where the core of the heart is at, growing and bearing fruits. When you say cross, are you referring to the Christ cross? Sorry guys, this is a bit disjointed. I'm just trying to find my way into, still feeling new to this process. Let me answer the first question because it's a really good question. So just bear with me. How do you distinguish INFJ's positive use of NI versus potential negative use? Okay, I don't have a like a script answer for you. I really just have an answer that I have for you now as I read the question. So let me just keep the question available to me so that I can get. So let me look at it. Let me answer that, Kieran, this way: that the positive and negative could be when we're using it, like we use it in a healthy way in regards to the way in which we take in the information and process it. So it's when our intuition is accurate, when it is informing us correctly. Now, this ties in nicely with what we're doing here because INFJs, like any other type, while they have an attraction to truth and the depth and seeing things below the surface and all of that, they can be as much influenced by this stuff here as anybody else, but not know it. And so what I think I said in the other video, or actually it was a podcast interview that I did, was sorry, lost my train of thought again. Let me just find my way back into it. We can, let me just go back this way. If we've got this going on and we discover the Myers-Briggs and we find out we're INFJ and we read the description and it's sort of drawn to truth, see but that no one else can, this kind of thing, that information could get fed up into here instead of down into here to resolve some things. So an INFJ's NI could be inaccurate or very much skewed by its unconscious pain going on and start to see the world and interpret the world being influenced by this but not know it, forming NI conclusions that aren't accurate or healthy, or the way in which they communicate or make decisions based on their intuition leads to more problems. So this sort of stuff needs to be addressed in order for NI to be healthy, if you like, or accurate and informative. And the video that I did, I think I called it Supercharging NI. It was kind of metaphorical. But essentially, in that talk, I was describing the bedrock in that video was really describing this stuff here. The NI, if you like, is somewhere down here, and it can be muddied by all of this other issue. So clearing this out into a greater connectedness with NI, and in a sense be closer to ourself or our true self, and then start to that NI becomes very reliable and very helpful. So dealing with this can help it to be more positive, to use your language, as opposed to negative. The other way is that NI can be used as a defense mechanism, and there's a video on that as well. And NI can sort of be using this. Let me say that differently. NI, because of all of this, when NI sees what it thinks it knows, it can communicate in a defensive way, especially in the area of relationships where things aren't working, and they think they see the issues in the other, and they probably could be accurate about that, but they also feel threatened by what they see in the other person. Don't know, they feel threatened by it, and it actually threatens some aspect of this, and so NI gets used as a defense mechanism to address it. And that could be just communicating in a harsh way or a cold way, could feel kind of judgmental, versus someone who's more secure in themselves, having addressed some of this or aware of some of this, can hold truth a little bit more calmly and be more curious about what they see and what they know, as opposed to being harsh or even manipulative or defensive with what they know. I hope that covers it. Maybe there's other questions around that, but it took me a little way to try to difficulty getting into that question today, but hopefully that answers it to some degree. Where are we? Now, has there been any clarification to those other questions? Where's my email? Okay. Well, Co-S, I'll answer that question how I sort of see it. The MBTI, I mean, essentially describes cognitive functions and our preferences, for the four dichotomies. And so, in a sense, I think it describes the way we process and engage with the world. So it is inner. It is describing some inner process. For instance, NI is the inner. SET is, in a sense, it's the outer, but it's what it gets seen on the outside world. But TE has an inner process to it. I think what people can do sometimes with the MBTI is see it as maybe put too much weight on the MBTI as describing the self and the inner world. And so then rely on it too much, if you like, to deal with the outside world. And I think in some respects that's probably pretty natural, in the sense of discovering it, being very interesting and being enlightening and insightful, and learning from it. But a lot of people camp too long in the MBTI and try to use the MBTI to explain too much of themselves, and start to put other sorts of issues under the banner of their type, the MBTI type, when it could actually be something else. So anyway, that's just the way I'd sort of engage with that question at this moment. Neil, can management of fruit sometimes be the only or best solution? Absolutely, probably true, Neil. Sometimes I think people I mean, it's everything in a sense that sometimes that's necessary to address things on that level, especially if a person is suicidal and behaving in very reckless ways. Let's say if there's alcoholism, that could that in a sense the fruit also becomes a problem. So it's like addressing the fruit of the problem. Dependency and fruit can sometimes blur a little bit. So sometimes dealing with the fruit is required to bring back a certain level of manageability in order to then do the other work. If there's room or if there's capacity to do the other work, sometimes some people just can't do that level of work for whatever reason. But yes, I agree. I think sometimes addressing an area of fruit is certainly helpful and certainly can be a necessary starting place, and it could lead to the other areas. You know, you could think of workplace training and professional development, things that people can do that the employer might organise for the team could help to uncover some of the other issues. So in trying to improve the job situation, become more efficient and so on through a PD, could through the content of that professional development could lead to an awareness of these other fruits, or potentially even lead to maybe asking some of these other questions. Okay. Okay, Kate's saying that she thinks CoS was asking if MBTI describes true self or false self. Okay, that's a good question. I would say that the way I sort of see the MBTI is it's like I said, when we're born, we have a sense of our core self, our true self, or who we are when we're born. And I think the MBTI talks into a bit of that in the sense of cognitive processes, what we lean towards naturally, the thinking and feeling and so on. The whole idea of the MBTI in that context is that they're considered inborn preferences, not preferences that can change over time, though we can grow in different areas, but that we're looking for the inborn. So, so I think what can happen is the MBTI is unique in the sense that essentially goes into sort of unconscious processes with NI and things like that. And I think it's a way or a lens in which to see the self. However, I think it can also, I think it comes down to the individual engaging with the MBTI material. Is people could use the MBTI to reinforce false self, could reinforce this sort of stuff. So I remember seeing a comment in a thread a couple of years ago. Someone was saying something along the lines of, I have a boyfriend. I can't remember what the type her boyfriend was. It's irrelevant. But she was saying he's in and out of this relationship. He's in this relationship with me, and then he's out of it, and then he's back in with me, and then he's out. You know, and essentially they were asking the question: is a symptom of a personality, a certain MBTI personality type? And it's a good question to ask, because the answer should be no, that's not personality type. There's some other issues going on under the surface that is causing that erratic, unstable, sort of double-minded behavior. And unfortunately, there could be some danger that people will say, oh yeah, that's a typical so-and-so personality type. And then it kind of normalizes abnormal behavior. So I think when people engage with the MBTI, it comes down to how much of this stuff is influencing the way they're reading into the type. So maybe another example is maybe that essentially sums it up. But there really is a danger that this kind of situation can cause someone to look into their type in a vastly different way to someone that's actually aware of this stuff in their lives. They're able to more distinguish between, and this is something that I do in counseling, is distinguishing between personality type versus unresolved childhood wounds or unresolved relationship problem wounds and things like that. Some people, like, they might go, I avoid this, that, and the other thing because I'm an introvert. And in further exploration, it could be actually, no, that's not introversion. There's something else going on there. And it might come out that they're avoiding certain situations because of some childhood trauma that they experienced, and they actually feel unsafe in those environments, and so they're avoiding them. But for whatever reason, they put it under introversion as opposed to maybe some unresolved trauma. And the separating of that can be very powerful. It's like, okay, so if it's not introversion, then it's maybe something else. And now when I address, now I can actually go to those places with maybe a bit more comfort, or at least I'm able to recognize why I'm uncomfortable there. So that's something that's very powerful, is being able to separate personality type traits, if you like, from unresolved issues. And I think a lot of people kind of blend the two together. Okay, maybe we've come to the end of the questions. Let's see. No further questions. Okay. Let me just have a quick read of the. There are things here. Okay. Okay. Well, okay. It looks like that's about. G'day, Richard from North Carolina. Hope all's well with you. Well, thanks everybody for coming to the Inside Outers live stream, the first one for the year. Like I said at the start, it will be happening for the US. It'll be the last Thursday of every month. For people in Australia and sort of the Asia Pacific region, it would be Friday afternoon. This video will be available on the channel, and this chart, the proper chart of this, will be available on the website once I put the video with it. So it should be there. If you're watching this after this video, it should be there. For those watching it now, it will be available soon. Is there anything else? That's about all. Just to maybe just re-mention, if you're wanting to inquire about the counselling sessions, the counselling that is available, the counselling services, feel free to send an email to me at contact@scottericmorgan.com, or visit my website, scottericmorgan.com, and send an email through there. I'd be happy to respond to you. And thanks again for viewing this today, and I'll see you again in another video.